Hi you guys, in today's video we're going to be going over how to write an introduction. So your introduction is just this purple part right here. As it says, it can be a quotation, which is just the fancy noun form of the verb to quote, a statistic, an anecdote in some way that relates to the rest of your essay. It shouldn't yet reveal the answer to your question, but it ought to allude to it. It ought to be one or more sentences. You can use, and probably should, use an in-text citation at the end of your attention grabber. So a few things that I want to point out. This should not be a question from now until the rest of your writing career. That's just not a way that we write introductions anymore. It was a really nice baby step for when you were just starting out writing essays, but that is a technique that we now retire. It says that it should not give away what your thesis is. So, for example, right here, I shouldn't start out my essay by saying, William is not self-made, right? Because that's what my thesis is. Instead, it's something that alludes to the thesis, and it has to relate in some way. So I'm going to look back at my thesis. Although many people would argue that William is the definition of self-made, he owes much of his success to his family, friends, and Dr. Chizime. So I have already found two pieces of, I already found an introduction, two introductions. So I am just going to show you two examples right now. So the first one, if you look up here, is this National Statistic Office on poverty. And if you look down through the report, I have already found it, but it said something like 63% of Malawians are multidimensionally poor. 70% versus 25% right here. Oh, here it is. 63%. So I am going to say here, according to UNICEF, 63% of Malawian children are multidimensionally poor. I'll say impacted by poverty. And then it can be just one sentence, it can be multiple, however many you need in order to connect it back to your background information. So I'm going to say multidimensional poverty. I think I need a little dash right here. Refers to a lack of education, necessary resources, housing, and more. And now it should connect to my background information. If I had background information written, I might want to revise it a little bit to connect back to my introduction. So for example, I could say something like, one person who has faced the reality of sub-Saharan poverty is William Kamkwamba. And then I'll start explaining the book. So in William Kamkwamba's book, he explains how, stuff about windmills. And then it's going to connect to my thesis statement. So this is just one example of a nice introduction. Oh, and by the way, right here, I need to have my in-text citation. It should be the author, but if you don't have the author, you're actually going to use the name of the article. So this is called Child Poverty in Malawi, and you do an abbreviated form of the title. So I'm just going to, in quotation marks, write Child Poverty. And then I would include in my works cited this UNICEF thing. Another way that you could do it is to just use an anecdote from the book. It's a little bit more simple. So one thing that I found was in chapter 14. This is when Dr. Chizime randomly finds him, and then, the officials find him, and then it leads him to Dr. Chizime, it leads him to the TED conferences, etc. So Something else I could do is an anecdote from the book. And I could say, one unassuming November day, Malawian officials stumble upon, and remember that we have not introduced William or the book or anything, so we need to make sure that we contextualize this. So one unassuming November day, Malawian officials stumble upon a handmade windmill in the provinces of Malawi. Sure, stumbled. This curiosity led to an exploration of the surroundings and the finding of its owner, Mr. William Kamkwamba. And now I can go into my background information, which might be something like Kamkwamba was a teenage boy living in poverty. Living in poverty. He was interested in science after reading Explaining Physics. Which inspired him to build a windmill. All right, so that kind of leads into it because this is related to my central thesis, and I will go on to explain further that had they not found the windmill, then he would have never become famous. He probably would have never gotten himself out of poverty, or his cousins and friends, that it just is because of this one event and this one lucky circumstance, just as an example. So hopefully this has helped you with your own attention grabber, and please let me know if you have any questions.